This was a sad week. We lost Mantaur this week. Good old Mantaur. Half man, half tar. Mike Halac passed away in his sleep on Tuesday at the age of 55. He had been battling type 2 diabetes for many years, and it had gotten worse, apparently. He had suffered a couple of bad falls recently. I know there was one about a week before his death, and the last one the day before, which landed him in the emergency room. And when he got home, he fell asleep, and he never woke up again. So he got his start working in Germany back in the early 90s under the name Bruiser Mastino. And Bruiser Mastino is the same name. He used the name initially on WWE house shows in 94, but that's the same name that Kane, Glenn Jacobs, also wrestled under when he was in WCW, oddly enough. I don't know that there was any connection there, but there's been at least two Bruiser Mastinos in wrestling. But the following year, he debuted on television in WWE not as Bruiser Mastino, but as Mantaur. Of course, this was a product of the Vince McMahon acid trip of 1995 that also gave us gimmicks like T.L. Hopper, the wrestling plumber, Duke the Dumpster Drozy, the wrestling garbage man, Isaac Yankem DDS, the wrestling dentist. Whatever happened to that guy? We had Jean-Pierre Lafitte, the wrestling pirate. We had Santa Claus, the evil wrestling Santa from the South Pole, not the North Pole. We had Goldust that year. Well, I mean, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then, I guess. But none of them were as god-awful as Mantaur, and it wasn't Mike's fault. You know, the man was just doing his job. I know that, people call Rhino the man-beast. But before Rhino, Mantaur was the true man-beast. He would even tease goring his opponent before the match. He had these giant horns on this giant bison head that he would wear to the ring. And he also mooed like a cow. Or as I call it, it was more like a bellow. It's more like a Mantaur bellow from deep within. It'd be like, brrr! That's the best way I could describe what it sounded like. I'm not sure exactly what he was supposed to be, other than a rib on Jim Cornette, who managed him for a handful of tapings. I think Jim Ross summed it up best on one of his podcasts.
Mantaur. What kind of fucking name is Mantaur?
He was basically used just to put over their top baby faces like Bret Hart and Razor Ramon. After his run there ended, Paul Heyman brought him into ECW as Bruiser Mastino, but the fans chanted Mantaur at him. He just couldn't live the gimmick down. So he didn't last long there. I remember WWE brought him back in 96 as Goldust's bodyguard for the In Your House match that Goldust had with the Ultimate Warrior. They never even gave him a name. He was just sort of the nameless bodyguard who showed up randomly one day to bump for the Warrior when the match was over. But in 1997, he beat Jerry Lawler to become the USWA champion. Then he lost the belt back to Lawler immediately a week later. He was wrestling under a mask as Tank of the Truth Commission, which, for those who don't know, Truth Commission was a short-lived faction in WWE. So short-lived, I had completely forgotten that he was even part of the group. But that's because he only lasted 2 matches. One of those matches was a 6-man tag on Shotgun Saturday Night against 3 job guys, and one of those job guys was a young Rhino. I mentioned before Rhino as the man-beast. I forgot the two of them actually shared the ring at the same time, although this was long before Rhino was the man-beast. But his last appearance as Mantaur was 4 years ago in a battle royal at one of the Joey Janela spring break shows. Even though the guy was saddled with one of the worst gimmicks of all time, it was nice to see that he could at least embrace it one more time, even if just for the payday. These days, that type of stuff gets over well. Wrestling fans are a very nostalgic bunch. Even for the stuff people universally would have condemned or considered bad at the time. I mean, if you had the Gobbledygooker, anytime the Gobbledygooker shows up, you still get a reaction. So people tend to be more nostalgic over time, even for the bad stuff, I think, in some cases. So he left more of a mark on the wrestling business than a lot of guys do. There are a lot of guys, and girls for that matter, who will pass in and out of the wrestling business, and 10, 20, 30 years from now, people won't know what their fucking name is. But to this very day, people still remember Mantaur, even if it's for the wrong reasons. It's kind of hard to forget. If you lived through it, if you saw it, and you experienced it, you will never forget Mantaur. So I will always remember Mantaur and smile.